The first signs that anything was wrong came in the quiet, steady rhythm of the radar sweep aboard Stone, a national security cutter moving through the blue-gray waters north of Venezuela. The ship had been sailing a predictable route for days, conducting interdictions, boarding suspicious vessels, and cataloging the masses of contraband that flowed endlessly between South America and the Caribbean. For the crew, this operation was routine, even if the last 72 hours had been unusually productive. 3 fast boats had been stopped, their crews detained, their decks overflowing with scrapped bricks of cocaine. The seized cargo, more than 2 metric tons, was already secured in the cutter's hold, catalogued by law enforcement specialists who understood exactly what kind of cartels and political actors would be furious to discover their multi-million-dollar shipment abruptly gone. At 1414 Atlantic Standard Time on November 5, 2024, the crew of Stone believed themselves still within the bounds of routine duty. The cutter, 418 feet of steel reinforced for rough seas but never designed to duel warships, skimmed calmly across the water. Its engines hummed, its crew rotated through shifts. The sea was calm enough that the bow barely punched through the surface. For the men and women aboard, it was a good day, until the radar operator leaned forward with a frown, tapping the screen as 3 distinct signatures entered the display. The captain responded instantly. Maritime officers are trained to expect the unexpected, but 3 large, fast-moving vessels closing at nearly 30 knots was an unusual development, especially this far offshore. The radar operator refined the picture, cycling through settings, filtering noise, analyzing each return line by line. The signatures were unmistakably military, larger than civilian traffickers' boats, heavier than the go-fast craft the Coast Guard normally encountered in these waters. The CO stepped into the Combat Information Center, his expression tightening as he viewed the screen himself. 3 Venezuelan offshore patrol vessels, likely Constitution class given their size, were coming in hard. Their formation was aggressive and deliberate. Stone was in international waters, a full 23 miles outside Venezuela's territorial sea, but the ships closing in were clearly unconcerned about boundaries. The captain issued immediate orders: alert the crew, broadcast on maritime channels, notify U.S. 4th Fleet, and send a direct request for emergency support. To the north, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Gravely received the distress call. The bridge crew acknowledged it within seconds. The destroyer's commanding officer ordered flank speed, the massive gas turbines roaring to life as the ship surged forward, accelerating toward the unfolding crisis. But Gravely was still more than 100 miles away, and even at maximum speed the destroyer needed over an hour to reach the scene. Stone would be alone for a long stretch, outgunned by ships designed for coastal warfare, ships whose commanders seemed intent on forcing a confrontation. Back aboard Stone, the air began to thicken with tension. Sailors moved briskly but purposefully through the passageways, donning protective gear, readying weapon systems, checking firefighting stations. The hum of the ship changed in tone as departments reported through their chain of command. The cutter had endured storms and narcotics traffickers, but this was different. The approaching vessels were armed with automatic 76 mm cannons, heavier guns than anything on Stone. They carried missiles, electronic warfare gear, and between them more than 180 sailors. 3 warships against 1 cutter was not a fair fight, and everyone aboard knew it. At 1414, the Venezuelan lead vessel, later identified as Guamacuto, closed into communication range and issued a sharp, clipped ultimatum. The voice on VHF declared that Stone was violating Venezuelan waters and must withdraw immediately or face consequences. The captain of Stone responded calmly but firmly. The cutter was operating in international waters, conducting lawful operations, and would not change course. The moment those words left the radio, the atmosphere aboard shifted again. It felt like a line had been drawn. 3 minutes later, Guamacuto fired its first warning shots. Bright streaks arced outward, and the explosive splash of 76 mm rounds erupted less than half a kilometer ahead of Stone's bow. The concussion rolled through the cutter like a physical shove. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Warning shots or not, this was hostile fire. The captain ordered the crew to battle stations. Down below, sailors ran strapped on helmets, checked communications gear, manned damage control posts. The 57 gun on Stone's bow pivoted as its crew prepared to return fire if necessary, even though the weapon lacked the punch needed to defeat armored, missile-capable patrol ships. By 1419, the tactical picture had deteriorated into something far more dangerous. Guamacuto maneuvered directly ahead. Yagaraparo swept to Stone's starboard side. Temako cut across the port approach. It was a classic bracket, 3 ships encircling one, limiting escape routes, tightening their formation like predators corralling prey. Venezuelan commanders likely believed Stone would retreat or surrender. They were wrong. At 1421, Guamacuto fired again, this time not into the water. A 76 shell slammed into Stone's stern, detonating across the deck. The shockwave rattled the ship's superstructure, shredded communications gear, and sent metal fragments slicing across exposed surfaces. 3 sailors were injured immediately: burns, lacerations, bleeding wounds. Smoke rose from the aft deck as crew members rushed toward the blast site. Stone's captain declared a mayday across all frequencies. The cutter was under fire, taking damage, and engaged by hostile state naval forces. Damage control teams were already moving. Fire hoses uncoiled, pumps activated. Medical corpsmen scrambled to tend the wounded. Meanwhile, Gravely was racing across the water at full speed. The destroyer's Combat Information Center tracked the engagement in real time through a mix of satellite data, shared communications, and Stone's transmissions. The commanding officer requested authorization for weapons release. With each passing minute, Stone's situation worsened. If Gravely didn't reach missile range soon, the cutter might not endure the onslaught. Stone continued to take fire. Yagaraparo's 76 cannon sent round after round slamming into the cutter's midsection. Shattered glass rained through compartments, a lifeboat disintegrated. The galley burst into flames, trapping crew until damage control forced the blaze back with hoses and extinguishers. The ship began listing to port as seawater seeped in through torn plating. 7 crew members were wounded now, and the medical bay was pushed to its limits, yet Stone fought back. At 1424, the cutter's 57 gun opened fire, sending a rapid stream of shells into the hull of Guamacuto. The rounds sparked across metal, damaging sensors and igniting small fires, but they lacked the destructive weight to cripple a heavy patrol vessel. They bought time, nothing more, but time was exactly what Stone needed. At 1431, Gravely was within harpoon missile range. The destroyer's fire control system locked onto 3 targets in sequence. Authorization to fire came through, and at 1432, 4 harpoon missiles launched into the sky, each hurling forward with deadly precision. As their rocket boosters ignited, the missiles streaked low over the ocean, angling toward the battle at high subsonic speed. The Venezuelan ships didn't detect them until minutes later. By the time alarms blared aboard Guamacuto, it was already too late. The missiles raced toward their targets at wave, top height, their radar seekers guiding them unerringly. The sea hissed beneath their flight paths, foam spraying as they tore across the water. The first missile hit Guamacuto at 1439. The explosion was immense. Nearly 500 pounds of high explosive tore through the hull, detonating deep inside engineering spaces. Flames burst outward in violent plumes. Seconds later, the second harpoon hit the superstructure, blowing apart the bridge and killing the command staff instantly. The ship broke in two, its support beams collapsing as fires raged uncontrollably. In less than 2 minutes, Guamacuto slipped beneath the waves. Yagaraparo attempted to turn and flee, but the sea-skim missiles found her easily. A harpoon struck amidships with enough force to lift the hull out of the water. Bulkheads collapsed. Machinery tore free. The ship capsized rapidly, sinking within 4 minutes. Dozens of sailors abandoned ship, leaping into the water as flames and smoke billowed across the surface. Only Temako remained, and its captain made the only rational choice left. He ordered the engines killed, raised a white flag, and ceased fire. The crew gathered on deck, hands raised, signaling surrender. Gravely's fire control team, moments from launching a second salvo, diverted the remaining missiles to detonate harmlessly in the open ocean. Stone, battered but still afloat, began to pull away to a safe distance. The cutter's crew kept fighting fires and stabilizing the ship. By 1443, the immediate threat had passed. Gravely closed the final miles and arrived as a guardian, deploying boats to rescue survivors from the sinking Venezuelan vessels. International law required them to save anyone in distress, regardless of nationality or combat status. The aftermath was grim. Approximately 122 Venezuelan sailors were thrown into the water when their ships went down. Gravely retrieved 89 of them, 33 had perished in the blasts and sinking. Tamaco's crew of 60. One was taken into custody alive and processed according to military and humanitarian protocols. On Stone, all 7 wounded sailors survived thanks to rapid care. Over the next days and weeks, the political consequences rippled outward. Venezuela attempted at first to claim the incident was an unprovoked U.S. attack, but satellite imagery, maritime tracking logs, and international observers debunked that narrative quickly. The data showed clearly that Stone had been in international waters. The Venezuelan vessels had closed aggressively, and they had fired first. The United States responded swiftly but carefully. Fourth Fleet conducted a review of regional operations, concluding that Coast Guard cutters lacked the defensive capabilities required to withstand hostile state actors in contested zones. New policy mandated naval escorts, destroyers, or frigates whenever cutters operated near Venezuelan territorial waters. The era of unescorted law enforcement missions near hostile coasts was over. Stone returned to port for repairs, arriving in San Juan before being fully restored and placed back into service. Her crew returned to duty after recovery. The Venezuelan detainees were eventually repatriated through diplomatic channels months after the engagement. In naval circles, the event became a case study. It demonstrated with brutal clarity how quickly modern naval combat unfolds. 19 minutes separated the first warning shots from the destruction of 2 warships. The engagement showed that smaller navies relying on medium-caliber guns and lacking missile defense systems were critically vulnerable in a world of precision-guided weapons. It underscored the importance of sensors, command and control, and the ability to project force rapidly across distance. For the sailors on both sides, it had been chaos: metal, fire, water, smoke, and decisions made in seconds. Stone's crew had fought to keep their ship alive under impossible odds. Gravely's crew had delivered a decisive, controlled response while still preserving life where surrender allowed. Venezuelan sailors had followed orders, some understanding the risk, some perhaps never imagining how quickly the situation could spiral into catastrophe. 2 Venezuelan patrol boats now rested on the seafloor, slowly becoming artificial reefs as marine life colonized their broken hulls. They would sit there as a solemn monument to miscalculation, a warning etched into steel and salt water. And those who studied the event would repeat the same conclusion. In modern naval warfare, minutes matter, sensors matter, doctrine matters, and above all else, the decisions made by commanders in those minutes determine whether ships sail home or sink beneath the waves.